Well, hello.
Hi, everybody.
The podcast.
Back to it. First of all, thank you for the words of encouragement on my hammy, but actually I didn't pop it. It was just a tweak, and I'm fine today. So I think it was more like a bad cramping, tiny tweak. Yeah. But scary enough that I'm taking the week off, because I should have done that before. So there you go. Sometimes less stubborn, smarter is better. Let's go part 3 on the choices of exercises and food selection. So I had one of you guys commented about the idea, for example, of saying, so let's pick the bench, the deadlift, and the squat, and then we choose assistance work, and then if the lifts keep going up, that means you're doing good and you move forward. Right, so let's talk about that statement, because that goes to the point I was trying to make about exercise selection. So first of all, I want to relate that to what is the problem with science today. There is a reverse strawman argument happening in science right now, where things are about how precisely you can measure and not how precisely the hypothesis offered, precisely the hypothesis is offered. Right, so what do I mean by that? Let's decompose the statement. Let's say I take the deadlift to make it simpler, I do assistance work and it keeps coming up. Right, you wish. Not how this works. First of all, this had been tried many times as an idea, right? It's a very general idea to say that. It's broad strokes and with a lot of you wish argument, because let me tell you, from a realistic perspective, it doesn't work like that. You will hit moments where you hit a glass ceiling, you hit that can take up to a year and a half to break, things like that. It doesn't work like that, right? The whole idea that you can just do your assistance work and then you see if it works every so often only works at the beginning. The second you go anything past 250 to 70 kilos, it doesn't, unless you're naturally very strong, it doesn't work like that. Like most people, it's a broad statement. Right, too broad to be of interest for us coaches and athletes to move to become good at something. That is a broad statement you can use at the beginning of training, but that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not offering an idea toward what do you do in the first 2 years of your training. There's plenty of podcasts on that. What I'm trying to offer with a move safer, move better, move faster is a contextual idea that you can use throughout your career. Like, how do we plan lifting from A to Z in a way, right? And not simply, so broad stroke will not be enough. And then this is something you see everywhere. So let's decompose that statement. Deadlift goes up, so you do the assistance work, deadlift goes up over time. All right, so over time means what? 3 months, 6 months, a year, 10 years? By how much? 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 50 pounds, 100 pounds? Every 6 weeks, every 6 years?
It's a very wide.
Right, it's way too broad of a statement. So the problem with that is that, you have a hypothesis versus observation testing, right? So prediction, observation, hypothesis versus testing. We are focusing right now on testing precisely for things. So did you gain 4 pounds, 4.5 pounds, 5 pounds? That we can measure. But the more precisely you test something, the more precisely you go nowhere. What do I mean by that? By that I mean that the second you start testing, you introduce context. The more precise you are in your testing, the more precise you are in your contest, the less it applies to a generality. So the problem that you see, that reverse strawman argument that we have in science today, and not especially in the fitness industry, but in the fitness industry as well, is that idea that you're going to have precise testing to prove a very broad point. And that is about as unscientific as you can make it, right? So what do I mean by that?
You're just looking for the information that proves your point.
And that's why it's a reverse strawman argument. Yeah. So a strawman argument is making someone who said something change what the person said to make it easier to attack. When you measure precisely, what you're doing is you're trying to be not being able to be attacked on your testing, but using that as a way to make a point toward the broad generalization, and that is the incorrect part. Yeah. Your precise testing only proved a very precise hypothesis within a very specific context. It cannot be used to widen that. So what do I mean by that? So if you have a test, let's say the testing with assistance work. Right, so let me, for example, give you 2 ways to game the idea, right off the bat. I'm going to use someone who's good at deadlifting, sucks at squatting, sucks as benching. And then I'm going to make him do a program, and that person is going to gain a percentage X on his deadlift because he responds very well to the deadlift. Right. I cannot use that person to say, there's my program for the deadlift, it works. Because that person is just good at deadlifting. It's a natural, simple lift for that person.
Yeah. That person has the neural output for it, the natural, body
length,
type for
body
it,
type, and stuff like that, right? And
for it as well. So it's a different idea.
By the way, if we go this route, there's another way to game it. I don't deadlift for 2 months.
Oh yeah, you used this on snatch as an example, which I love.
I did, yeah. Right. Yeah, so I don't deadlift for 2 months, 3 months. Let's say I have a squat of 500 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't squat for 3 months. My max becomes, I lose what, 10%, maybe 15%. So my max becomes 450 instead of 500. I give myself an 8-week course on the squat. I go back to 500. I have not gained anything. I just regained my former strength.
Yeah.
But if I were to use it in a study, no matter how precisely I'm testing the squat, because my squat will be precise to the pound, so I can give like super fancy exercises. And my program will be done with very, very, very precise percentages. And at the end, I've gained 10%, 11% total on my squat. Well, technically, yeah. But what I did not do, it gives the context that the study was based upon. And I forgot to mention that I haven't squatted in 3 months. Right, so first of all, that's very unethical of me to do that, but you could see I could easily manipulate those numbers to make my squat program look really good. Hey, look, we did it on X number of person. On average, we gained 10% PR in 8 weeks. Wow, that's amazing. Right, and this is science today. They do that with food, with stuff like that. So, because you can easily clean up someone's food intake, same calorie, but just clean up and suddenly they start losing fat. Well, yeah, because you're not eating at Burger King anymore. Right, and by the way, if I eat at Burger King, I can tell the numbers they give me.
Yeah.
Which is bread is that much, but then, protein is that much, which is not true because whatever meat they use, go figure where it comes from. Instead of that, I give you Parisian bread, made on the stone and everything. I give you a beef that was from Argentina, from a cow that ate grass and everything. I can do exactly the same 2 things, and trust me, you will not respond to it the same.
Yeah.
So and this is the biggest problem that you see today, is that reverse strongman argument, where people are focusing too heavily on the testing mechanism, but not enough on the hypothesis making. Your testing the more precise your testing is, the more your hypothesis has to be precise and contextual. Yeah. You cannot use precise testing in that sense to make a point about a broader hypothesis. Yeah. So for example, saying something like, well, my deadlift goes up over time. Again, by how much? Or is that acceptable? If I say 5 pounds every 3 years, that would obviously not be acceptable as a proof, right? So we need to define what is an acceptable jump within the first 2 years of training, 4 years of training, 10 years of training. So that starts to come in. So now we're starting to get into very complex things.
Oh yeah, and then it also depends, like how often are you able to train, with what type of person are you? What do you like to do?
Right. So by the way, once you get up on a deadlift, was that neural output?
Right.
Or because it was a max versus a five rep max? So which one? What if you gain just on technique alone because your technique was shit, which I fixed, and now suddenly you can lift more? Did I make you stronger? Well, technically you lifted more weight. So does that count as stronger if I'm just doing the technique? What if before you were heavily focusing on strongman, which I cut out completely, and I'm only making you deadlift? Well, chances are your deadlift is going to go up. And by the way, by doing more reps on a deadlift, you get better at it technique-wise. So which one is it? Right, and that's my problem with those statements. And that's what we're trying to offer here, is we're trying to give you an overall idea on how to move the needle forward, right? But you can't just say, get a program, and if he moves over time. This is why we end up in this mess in the first place, is you have to be very, very precise in your hypothesis so that we can test it, so we know that we're moving forward. So, because when you say, let's do assistance work, I'm like, okay, which one? Because that's exactly what I was trying to go. Is like, which one is the type of assistance work that is required and to do what? My idea is that we have to push forward the structure first to make sure that we don't break. That's to move safer. So then we can go into, let's go it a bit more. What is the structure for the deadlift? Because that's what's gonna hurt you moving forward. And then after that, moving better. What does that mean? Well, technique will go into it, and then technique not in the sense of tension in the right places, but more like understanding that you have certain leverages that need to be incorporated into the idea of a deadlift that you want.
What is your deadlift? Are you more of a sumo or more of a
for example
person? Where do you want to have your hands? Where do you want to place your feet?
All right, stuff like that. And so let me explain the way I'm gonna handle my deadlift so that we put everything in the right context. Right. So I'll use mine because it's easier. I've been training for a very, very long time. So I know more or less where I'm at on certain things, which means, so for example, another example, a person commented like, how come you say you're putting on a lot of muscle lately?
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because
right.
You're looking gorilla-ish, like
right.
got them shoulders, got them, you gain definitely a lot of weight and you
right.
still have a lean face.
Right,
lean
so,
stomach,
right, so how did I do that? Did I use steroids? No, I did not. I have my blood panel. I'm at 625 on the overall testosterone, even in a fatigue state, so that's pretty good, right, at 48. And my free testosterone is 440. I have all the stuff to show you that if I were on steroids, those numbers would not look the way they look. So if you want to see my blood work, I'll put it up, but you'll have to take my word for it. I am not on steroids, which, by the way, doesn't matter if I put those numbers, because if you don't want to believe me, you won't anyway. So I don't know. Makes no difference. Either you believe me on this one or you don't. I mean, honestly, if I were on steroids, I would say it.
I was going to say, I think over the years you proved that you always tell the truth.
Not,
and why wouldn't you lie about using steroids?
I wouldn't lie blatantly about something like, plus who gives a shit? I don't compete in CrossFit. If I compete in Strongman, there's no testing.
Well, if you compete in Strongman, everybody uses steroids, by the way.
So if I'm trying to become pro, I might use some help chemically, yes. Like, would I do it is a question. I might do some very light stuff like Anava or shit like that, but anything past that, honestly, I won't lie. I think I'm too old to risk my life on this shit. So I'm gonna try to get as strong as I can this way. And 8 weeks before a competition next year, would I use some Anavar to cut weight? Yeah, maybe. And if I do, I'll tell you guys. In the meantime, I'm touching zero. Yeah. I'm just getting stronger the good old-fashioned way, right? So, because like a few months ago, I was about like 102, 103 kilos, and now I'm 111. So am I as lean now as I were then? No, I'm not. I've gained around the waist. I easily put, what I would say, like a 2% body fat up, I'm guessing, but that still counts as a lot of muscle. And then I have a fairly low level of inflammation, so I'm not poofy or stuff like that. So I've done things, I believe, the right way, especially in the 40s. It's not the easy thing to put muscle in like that. But you also have to understand what putting on muscle means. I've put on a tremendous amount of muscle, for example, on the rear delt, this part of my triceps, my hammies lately, and my upper pec. So how did I do that? Right. So I did it in a very simple way. I got discipline toward the stuff I didn't want to do. So did I put a huge amount of muscle on my lats versus my my lower pec or stuff like that? Not really, because that I've trained all my life. You know what I didn't do before? I did not focus specifically on the upper pec or on the rear delt or on the hammy. So what I would do on the rear delt is I would do it in the shoulder workout once a week, do 4 sets and be done with it. Well, turns out that's not enough by a long shot. Upper pec, I would try to do the incline bench press, and it would murder my shoulder. So I would do 2 sets once a week. Well, guess what?
Doesn't do anything.
Wasn't enough. And it goes on and on and on like that, because I was doing the work because, like I was filling up the boxes. I would, tack. So I did my incline. After I do all my stuff, I'm going to do some incline. After that, I'm going to do some rear delt. I didn't do shit with it. Honestly, I was just, checking the boxes, because that's what you do, right? Because as long as your deadlift goes up and you do your assistance work, you're doing good. Well, turn out, no, it's never that simple. So as I got smarter, and I got a lot smarter lately, I have to say, about things like that. Why? That's why I was talking about the hundreds, for example, so much, because it made such a difference for me. So what I realized is that the hundreds were the key. So the hundreds, the idea really, and then just to repeat all this, is not to do rear delt, is to do a movement pattern for a number of reps, a high number of reps, so that you can focus on the eccentric and set movement pattern and get the proper activation out of it. So what did my rear delt respond? Because I didn't work my rear delt. That's why I had to get out of my thick skull, is that it's not about isolation, it's about movement pattern. So what did I did instead is I did pull with my arm straight in the frontal plane. You know what a pull with my arm straight in the frontal plane is? It's this movement right here. Guess which muscle it does? Rear delt. Does it do only the rear delt? No, it doesn't, because you get the rhomboids, the yeah. But what it does a lot of is activating the rear delts. All right, so I did arm straight movement pattern. So instead of trying to focus on the rear delt and then just losing my shit over it and going heavier, I was like, all right, so I'm going to go in the hundreds movement pattern, focusing on the eccentric for so many sets of 15 to 20 reps. And then I did that, but instead of, I did it 2 sets, 3 to 4 times a week. So 3 sets about 3 times a week. Why? Because I needed that continuous refresher of a movement pattern to get better at said movement pattern. Not developing my rear delt, just get better at the movement pattern, which of course developed my rear delt. Yeah. But for me, that visualization was necessary. Otherwise, I would start to focus on my rear delt and actually start to pull with my arms bent, because I wanted to go heavier. Because ego. Yeah. Because I don't like to do isolation work. Because it's boring. So instead, but because I was using the in-between weight, because suddenly ego gets in the way. If I'm going to do isolation work, I'm thinking Arnold Schwarzenegger or the dude that I saw bodybuilding, and I'm thinking I have to use those weights, and before you know it, I'm using exactly 60-pound dumbbells, and I'm doing what they do, even though I'm not doing what they do because I'm not them, and I don't have their experience in their genetics, and before you know it, I'm going too heavy, and I'm going to our neural output on a muscle that is not being developed, and if I don't hurt myself, I don't get anything anyway. Exactly. Right, so you know what I was lacking, what I was missing? I was missing that conceptualization of the work. Yeah. So first it was move safer, move better, move faster. So skill, muscle capacity, neural output. So I was like, all right. So eventually I got through my thick skull to go like, how come the rear delts are not responding? Left, right versus left. Okay, right. So I'm going to do the pull, arm straight, frontal plane. And then I did that for sets of 20. But at first I was on the skill phase in the sense of getting the connection to this area. I didn't feel it in the rear delt at first. I mostly felt it between the rear delt and the low trap, right? That area. Right, so I guess I had to develop that. And then I kept doing it, not putting an emotional charge into it so that I would not take it in neural output and try to be the strongest dude in the gym on the pec deck, because who cares? Welcome to ego, right? All right, so I had to do that. And then, so I couldn't do 5 sets or 10 sets because then you would have to focus too hard on this. And 10 sets a week is not interesting, like we talked about last time. It's better to divide those 10 sets and put them into 3 sessions. So I started doing that. The benefit too is I could do 2-3 sets, just really blast, forget about it, come back 2 days later, do it again, forget about it, come back at it. So instead of blasting in 1 session, I started to do it in 3-4 sessions, but always thinking movement pattern. For me, it worked really well. So I went from skill, finding attention in the mid-back for that movement pattern, into muscle quantity, muscle quality. I'm still not fully in muscle quality. I'm in the muscle quantity. Now that I established the proper connection and I understood the pattern that were to be done, muscle started to grow, muscle quantity. Right, that's how I got the real delt. Now, how long did that take? 4 months.
Yeah, and before that, it's also like the other months that you spent like putting on like the strength and everything. So it's not an easy process.
Right, and on top of it, you have to understand, like there's 4 months of connection, but for that, there's 8 months of fucking it up. Because you have to integrate that part into an exercise. Because you're going to fuck it up at first.
Oh yeah, that too, by the way.
And I don't care how many YouTube videos you watch on the movement and how many dudes that have 1 million followers on YouTube tell you how to do a movement, you're going to fuck it up for a while. Because
absolutely,
that's how this works. And then after, so then we get to another part where now I'm asking you to do 2-3 sets of an exercise 3 times a week and to fuck it up for 3 months. So that means, wow, that wasn't right. And then until suddenly you go like, well, I feel a bit better. And now the work starts. So now you got 3 months of connecting the muscle, not seeing the muscle growth quite yet.
Well, and it's also like a good thing to know, like, not that. You know what I mean? Well, that's what you figure out in the months that you fuck it up. You go like, not that. And then next time you're going there, you're like, okay, that went wrong the last time. So it's a valuable thing. But when you're going through it, it's not the easiest. You know what I mean?
Right. And so now I know how to do it. But again, timeline is the problem. So that's why we say, like, as long as the weight goes up. Right. But how long till they go up? And that's why we say, like, as long as it goes up. This is a dangerous way of thinking as well. Because what if you hit a glass ceiling and the lift doesn't go up for a year? That doesn't mean you're not doing work. It just means that he hasn't flourished yet. So I might ask you to do a specific type of work for a year before you can break the glass ceiling you put yourself into. Yeah. Because half of the year is going to you figuring out that you were doing it wrong. How are you doing it wrong is those 6 months. And then you're going to start to figure out how to do it right. Right. So my point with the pyramids and then the boxes that I use and all that stuff is to be able to have a conceptual understanding of the steps necessary to move forward. Then the precise testing can be done, because then I can take each part, move safer, what does it mean? Move better, what does it mean? Move faster. And now we can test precisely each phase to see if that is valuable. The precise testing has to be matched by the preciseness of the hypothesis. Right, so that means that I need to be better, I need a clear hypothesis to be able to go into the testing phase. And that is what you're going to see misses the most in science today, is they go straight to precise testing. Why? Because that's what bureaucrats do. Bureaucrats ask you for a specific form. They don't care about the whole idea. They just want that form because that's what they do. Then you go to the next bureaucrat that asks you go to get married. You need 16 forms. You're going to see 4 different clerks for that. That clerk does not give a shit about the fact that you're getting married. You know what he wants? He wants Form 2A,
yeah.
Point 126. And you gave Form 2A, point 127.
Yeah.
That's not the right one. You're like, but I'm getting married. No, you're not, because you didn't give me the proper form. Did you translate it? I don't see the name of the translator on the form. You're not getting married. But I'm like, who cares? I'm getting married. She said yes. I say yes. I don't care. What I want is from 2A, 127. You give me 126. Right. So that's science today. It's a reverse Stroman argument where instead of talking about the conceptual aspect, but the hypothesis is incorrect, we're going to talk about the preciseness of the testing, because that's easy to argue. That's a bureaucratic way of doing things, which is what you see in today, because that's the dark side of capitalism, right? So people will argue about the percentages on the lift or about the deadlift of this or this or this, but you're leaving all the stuff in the back. Again, if I don't train the deadlift for 3 months and I go back to it, I will go up, and I will go up in weight, obviously. And I can make a complete bullshit study about it, program and everything, using extremely precise percentage that will not tell you the right story, and therefore will not work for you. Yeah. So what I'm trying to do with Strongfit is come up with a very precise hypothesis on how to do things. Then we can start testing and see if I'm right or wrong. Yeah. But you cannot make a statement like, let's do those lifts, let's see if it goes up over time. That is exactly the opposite of what I'm trying to do. That is basically where I think we are all doing it wrong, is that we have vague statements followed by precise testing. And that to me is a bureaucratic way of doing things that is wrong. Yeah. So let's go back on the deadlift. So I said that lady kind of hinted that I was taking steroids. Maybe I should have explained myself better when I said on the video, I've been putting on the long muscle recently, but I said namely rear delt, upper pec, and hammies. So,
well, no. First of all, even if she was thinking something, the way she asked could have been very, very different.
It's okay. She's Dutch, so it's fine. Yeah, we're used to it by now. Right? It's all good.
I'm not used to it. I'm not accepting my culture.
No, like exactly. It's all good. Right? No,
I'm joking.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
No, but,
it's all good, of course,
but I said namely the rear delt, the upper pec, and the hammies. So I want to explain what happened again with this, because I believe it explains the movement, the M pyramid, and the performance box at the same time. So the rear delt, I was doing the movement pattern incorrectly. I was bending my arm too much. Again, I was trying to pull. I was just trying to get heavy instead of taking the time to learn the movement, which took a while, honestly. But it's been the same thing for the upper pec. I could not work my upper pec correctly because my shoulders were hurting. That's another aspect of the moving safer. Sometimes you think you're weak at a movement. You're not weak. You're in pain.
Yeah.
If you're in pain, you can't lift shit. Like,
very true.
You're going to get to a glass ceiling so fast. So you're going to hear that in order to gain muscle, the M pyramid, the performance box, a lot of it has to do with breaking through glass ceilings. So sometimes you get stuck because it's a glass ceiling you created. But for example, your shoulder hurts on the inclined bench. Well, you're not going to lift very heavy. And I can tell you when it really starts hurting, you're going to lift very little.
Exactly.
But you're not weak. You're in pain.
Yeah.
There's a difference
and
there.
Your body doesn't want to go there if you're in pain.
It doesn't want to go there.
It screams. Every person.
Wait, so by the way, if it hurts your shoulder to incline bench press, how often are you going to do it? Not often, right? I'm asking you to do an exercise 3 times a week. You're not going to do that if it hurts your shoulder 3 times a week. Or you're going to do it with an empty barbell, and who cares? Then now I don't get the stimulus that I'm needed. You know what I mean? So in order for you to do 2-3 sets of an exercise 3 times a week, it cannot hurt. I know it sounds stupid when I say it like that, but you know what I'm saying? It happens all the time. That's why my upper pecs were not being connected, because it was just, I could not move forward because my shoulders were hurting. Move safer. Yeah. Right, so how do I do that? All right, so I have to go through the movement pattern. Okay, but now there's another problem, is that turns out there were some key missing components in my shoulder structure, S pyramid structure, right? What do I mean by that? I was, even at my peak, I could row a 180 dumbbell for 4. Not bad, but I could feel I was not as strong as I should have been. Now, even though I'm not as strong as I was at the time, I can do 200-pound dumbbell for 6. So what is the difference?
But yeah, what happened?
Yeah, the difference is I established the structure. So what did I do? I created the bicep and tricep opener a long time ago at the gym, and I was doing it with dumbbells. Turns out doing it with cables works better because you can work on the eccentric and the movement pattern.
I love working on the eccentric.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So by the way, that's a morning session, is working on the eccentric. Anyway, other podcast. Or end of it. But anyway, I started working on the bicep tricep opener with the cable, like with a pulley system, right? Which allows me to have a better control of the movement and work more on the eccentric. By doing that, again, 2-3 sets, 3 times a week, if not more, for months, I was able to find certain weird connections that were not there before. Namely, for the tricep opener, the lat into the lat into the triceps. As I was doing that through weeks and months of doing it, I also discovered that my real delt in a very specific angle was weak. So which made me look for that particular spot when I was doing my arm straight pull in the frontal plane. So now those two meet together, telling me which part of the system was weak and needed to be reinforced. So now they started feeding each other. The tricep opener was making my rear delt stronger. My rear delt through straight arm pull in the frontal plane was making my tricep opener better. As those two got better and started making lemonade, my dumbbell row got heavier. Because I worked the structure. Turns out when you lower the dumbbell when it's very heavy, if your shoulder gets out of line, you hurt, you can't bring it back. Yeah. So suddenly I could go up and down with no problem whatsoever in my arm, and therefore I could use more weight. You know why? Because not that I was not in pain, but my body was not afraid of getting hurt. Move safer.
Yeah, I feel like exactly like that on the bench. Like doing all the exercises we're doing, I feel like I can lower the weight correctly and I'm not afraid of hurting or misplacing.
Right.
And right away my bench goes up.
So move safer means don't be in pain when you lift, because you can't do that. Don't be afraid of being in pain when you lift. Otherwise, you can't get better.
Yeah.
So going back to the deadlift, I turned out working on my deadlift that it was the same thing with the tricep opener. That structure, because remember, doing deadlift with a barbell, you have to actually hang on to the barbell. So what is the first structure? The arm, namely that line that goes to the tricep to the lat, because that's what's going to connect the barbell through your arms to your back. So it turns out that the same spot in the lat tricep opener was weak. So that was making me externally rotate my arms to load more toward the latissimus dorsi because I was afraid of pinching my right shoulder because my upper back could not take the weight of the deadlift. By externally turning, I was going toward external torque by actually actively trying to create an external rotation instead of squeezing my pec and staying in internal torque. By going in external torque, I'm loading my lumbar erectors, I'm arching my back, I'm fucking up first the technique of the deadlift, and on top of it, I'm putting the stress in the wrong place, and my deadlift doesn't go anywhere. But why? Because I was afraid of pinching my right shoulder because I couldn't stay in internal torque. So how did I better my technique deadlift and by simply doing the tricep opener? If that makes sense. But if I don't have the move safer, move better, move faster, I'm going straight toward technique. But who cares if the technique is externally rotate, internally rotate, fine internal? If you don't have the muscles to stay within that technique you want to be in, then you can't do it. So now we're going back to the performer box. Is first you have to find the tension, right, into internal torque, but then you're going to have to build the muscle to stay in internal torque, right, within that structure. So that's muscle quantity first, turning into muscle quality. And so right now I'm in the phase of muscle quantity on certain crucial structural muscles. So which one are those? Right. So first, the rear delt into that tricep opener, like lat into tricep. So actually my triceps have grown a lot as well. I forgot to mention that one because if I see the videos of me when I was deadlifting 600 pounds, my triceps are noticeably smaller than they are now, noticeably, and that's the tricep opener. So I started to put muscle on there. Why? Because I did it correctly. It's not because I'm juicing, it's because I'm doing it correctly. Because the idea, I finally understood what the idea was of the stuff I was teaching. Go figure. Right, so I got smarter, right? So now I know how to do it better. Well, yeah, it goes in stages, man.
And that is so true. Like doing Strongfit, however you want to call it, it goes in phases. Like every time it sinks in and you go like, right.
I got it. And then 6 months from now you go like, no, I get it.
And you know when it comes to the second, when you start to feel confident, like, oh, I got this. And then you go like, no.
And then 6 months later you go, now I got it. Yeah, and then you repeat that. Yeah. So even me, like when I started to do the tricep opener actually correctly, by the way, I'm going to say that a year from now. But when I started to do the tricep opener correctly, I was like, oh, is that the muscle I'm looking for? Those are the muscle you're looking for, no type of thing. Right. And I'm going to say that a year from now. But right now, I made a lot of progress on the...
And then you look back at right now, a year from now, you're going like, oh,
yeah.
I was looking at myself going like, you wish you knew. You didn't know anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how I feel
that's
all
how
the time.
I look at myself all
That's
the
how I
time.
feel all the time. Yeah, except I'm 20 years on top of it. But yeah. So then suddenly, with the tricep opener, the rear delt and everything, I'm starting to find a better form on a deadlift. Yeah. Okay, cool. But then I realized my hammies are in the way. All right, so how am I fixing that? Well, it's a movement pattern thing, right? So I discovered that the hinge in the movement pattern was not where I wanted it to be. I was doing it too much in the 5 or 6 reps, but it was not progressing at the rate I wanted to. So what did I do? I went back to move safer in the sense of skill into muscle capacity. So I grabbed the hip belt machine at the gym, which I like a lot, and I started hinging for sets of 20 reps. So I'm back to the hundreds onto the hinge. And then I started to focus on a very specific part of my hammy that is not the inside head or the outside head, it's the one in the center, right? That's the one that helps you hinge the most. And because I targeted it correctly, through the feel of the movement without trying to go heavy and prove to everybody how strong I am, I was able to actually feel the movement correctly, and now that muscle started growing. That's the one I tweaked when I went heavy because I was not ready to go heavy on there because working on the movement pattern allowed me to stay within the proper movement pattern. Problem is the muscle is growing there and is immature still, and so it tweaked a little bit because it probably moved out of place because it tried to get away from the stress. My guess is so it kind of like a mean cramp in a sense. And so that's where I'm at. But that's where I'm at when I say I'm producing muscle a lot, is I'm doing it in the tricep, rear delt, that's the tricep opener, probably pec into, my bicep seems to be growing a bit lately. So
you're just basically filling up the gaps, and that makes you gain weight, right?
Yeah, because it's, by the
Makes
way,
you
like
look
there's
bigger
certain parts where for me to gain muscle on my lats, I would have to do a fuck ton.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like
Because-
you want them to still be strong and like be your biggest strength, but right now you need to also
There are
fill
gaps
up-
needs to be filled, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I move safer, move better, move faster, right? Like there's certain parts of my lats that are very strong, but there are gaps that need to be done. And that's the point of the 100s, the 50s, and the 5s, is to work on certain gaps based on the performance box, skill, muscle, capacity, neural output. So now I'm starting to see where I needed more skill. So rear delt, right? Hammies. That's obvious. Upper pec. Now, upper pec, I can bench like 225 for like, I don't know, like 7-8 reps, which I could never do without pain. So the key for me is not to do more than 8 reps, is to do it with better connection to my upper pec without pain. The more confident I feel on the incline bench, the more I'll be able to bench. I don't need to think neural output right now, because all I need to think is more confidence in my shoulders when I do the incline bench press. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't need to go neural output. What I need is move better. I can do move safer. There's no more pain, and I actually don't feel any pinch. But I'm still in the phase of move better. So move better, what does that mean? I'll go back to the deadlift so it makes more sense. I'm a stiff legger on the deadlift. I stiff leg. You know why? Because I have very short arm. If I measure the length of my arm like that, it's actually around 5'9", where I'm actually 6'1". So I actually have very short arms. Yeah, I have short arms. But I'm very broad shoulder-wise. It's just this to here is very short, right? But my shoulders are very wide, so you would think I have actually long arm. That's not true. I have just very broad shoulders naturally.
You appear as having long arms. But
Because
the
I
arms
have very
itself-
broad shoulders naturally, right? But I actually have short arms. So it should help me with the bench, but as I was saying, I didn't develop my arms. That was a mistake. So I could be better at pressing. I just need stronger triceps. Okay. I couldn't do the triceps because I didn't have that lat triceps connection because I use my torso so much. Because I have short arms, it makes me really good at pulling, like dumbbell rows and stuff like that. That's why I can do 90 kilo dumbbell roll for 6, is because the proportions of my body help me with that. Problem is I didn't develop the bicep or the tricep because I'm always using my torso for everything. So you see what that means? So because I have my natural goods and bads, I need a concept to allow me to work through things, right? So on a deadlift, right, I have long femur but short arms with a short torso. So that means I stiff leg the shit out of it. I can't keep the back at 45 degrees when you see the good sumo deadlifter do and go up. My legs are too long for that and my arms are too short. So I'm going to have more of a stiff leg version of a squat. So I need to be really, really good at stiff legging. That's what I need for my deadlift to go up. So that makes sense right now when I say that the best deadlift I ever had, 620, was after doing a block of 6 to 8 weeks of pure stiff leg. Because at the end, that's what I do. All right, so that means that I need to have a very strong mid-back, which I have already from the carries and all that stuff.
Triceps.
So what I need is a better hinge. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do 3 times a week, 2 to 3 sets of hinge for 15, 20 reps. Once a week, a hinge in the 5s. So that's my stiff leg, 5-6 reps with heavy weight. And then maybe if I want to reinforce my back, I could do a block pull fairly high because the second the bar passes my knee, then my back is at 45 degrees and I can lift whatever I want because my mid-back is so strong. The mid-back is the reason I had a 1,000-pound yoke carry with no business doing that since my squat was 550 at the time. So I had no business doing, I could really go fairly fast on a 900-pound yoke carry, which I have no business doing with a 550-pound squat. But it's because my mid-back is so strong. So bar to my knees, I can do whatever I want. The problem is below that, right? So I need to work the shit out below my knees. And that's what the 100 is going to be about. It's going to be getting, not perfect, but mastering the hinge, especially from mid-shin to the knees. And after that, I could always put, if I want to go neural output, I can do what I'm good at, which is bar above my knees and then load a ridiculous amount of weight on that just to strengthen what is already strong, because that's never bad. But no matter what, the 100s and the 50s are going to be on the hinge because I need better of that. So 100s is morning 3 times a week, 2, 3 sets, connecting the range of motion, the movement pattern that I want to get good at. The 50s are going to be my stiff leg. Deadlift, 50s to 5s, right? I could do probably go a little bit lighter, maybe sets of 8, so that I can hinge perfectly, but this time with a bit more weight, right? And do 2 sets, maybe 3, but just so that I can start building that. And then your output, I can go just from the top part of the hinge and then just overload everything like crazy.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's how I would build up. But first structure of the deadlift is that connection lat to tricep. So that means tricep opener 3 times a week to make sure that my upper back can sustain the weight. So how do I make my upper back also sustain the weight? I could do the bar at the knees up, because then my upper back will have to work as well. So then I get everything.
And you're working in the same movement pattern and everything.
Exactly.
Which is a good
and
idea
so I'm building,
anyway,
right. So I'm building all that because those are what is needed for me. That doesn't mean it's needed for you, but that's what's needed for me, because you might have a different technique than I do. I can different leverages. And I can have fun with a deficit stiff leg a little bit because it's going to make me use my quads a bit more, which for me is never bad since I don't have quads. So, you know what I mean? Like there's a way to that, but no matter what, I'm going to have to go at the structure. How do I go at the structure? I have to develop the muscle for it, for the movement pattern. How do I do that? I go through skill, muscle, capacity. What is that? Hundreds and fifties. So this is why I talk about the conceptual.
Well, this is why conceptual is so important, because
Exactly.
you cannot sell this program to. I cannot even do this program because for me, I don't have the same body type as you have. I don't have the same benefits as you have in the body and like that I have. Like it's different, right? So you can only teach me the principles so that I can apply it to me, right? And I think that's the way to go always.
Right, and that.
So you can also apply it to their clients.
Right, and that is the proper way to do science. You have to understand that testing can only be as precise as the hypothesis formulated. Otherwise, it is just a reverse Stroman argument. You are just trying to prove a broad point by using precise testing, which is always wrong.
Information to prove your own point.
It's always wrong.
Yeah.
So, and that is the work that I don't see being done and it's not fitness, it's in science today. Is clearer, better hypothesis. You cannot, what are you testing anyway if you don't have a clear hypothesis? What is it you're testing?
Yeah.
Like this is a failure of logical thinking.
Right. It's a good point. Actually.
And I'm not attacking you by the way, for making the comments, because thank you for commenting on the video. When I say like it's too broad of a statement to say I'm going to do deadlift, put the assistance work, and if it goes up over time. What I'm trying to explain is that this is a societal problem that we have right now, especially in science, where the need to prove a specific point in order to advance what is usually a selling argument is very strong. Yeah. We see that in social media, we see that in science, we see that with a medical field, which is part of science-ish, but we see that with big pharma. That's, well, big pharma is not science. Anyway, it is, but it isn't. My point being, for example, the serotonin conversation. Right.
That's very good.
There was a broad point being made. Depression is caused by low serotonin in the brain. Right, that is an extremely vague statement because depression you can have somatic or cognitive. Right, low serotonin, that's measurable, but you cannot apply it to depression because when they saw a SSRI that ups the serotonin, they saw depression was better. Okay, that depends how you measure depression. That test is already bullshit, but even if you could measure it precisely, which you couldn't, but let's say you could. All right, so you have proven that taking the pills has helped toward the depression. Somatic, cognitive, we don't know. But once you take the pill, the SSRI, how do you know it's the low serotonin that helped with and not the anti-inflammatory factors of the SSRI that did the job? Well, you don't, because you only precisely tested a very small area, because you can't precisely test everything either. You're going to have to be very precise in your testing to test precisely. So now you only did it within a specific context. And so in a way, it was a specific testing of a very broad thing, which means we're going to see that that pill does this. Right. And so they bullshitted you for 50 years using that argument. They took a, look, pills do this, into we cure depression. And then they used that to say depression is caused by low serotonin, which was a horrible logical thinking failure. Horrible, which I've been saying for years. And now, thank God, I have the paper that backs me on this.
Yeah, but like there's been...
But look what they did. They gave pills to people and then say serotonin went down. Depression went down. First of all, the problem is how you measure depression. I talked about it in many podcasts. First of all, is how you define depression, because you have to define at somatic versus cognitive. First of all, then how do you test that? You test that at first on mice by seeing how long they do not drown, basically. So that's another problem with that. But so you said depression is this, and that's how we test it. Okay, then you give me the pill, and you go. What the pills do is they raise the level of serotonin. Problem is that they don't do that only. They also anti-inflammatories and a number of things. And now you associate the two and you make a broad, and from there you went pills, depression, and from there you said depression is caused by pills. It's caused by low serotonin. Actually, someone was trying to attack the point, saying saying that I have a headache, I take ibuprofen, but headache is not caused by the lack of ibuprofen. Like, I agree, but that's exactly what they did with serotonin. Yeah. So it's funny because by making a point to attack my point, you made my point. Anyway, that's exactly what the big pharma did. Yeah. They went, and by the way, we still don't know that it's the serotonin part of the SSRIs that helps with depression. It could be the anti-inflammatory. The problem is we don't know. You know why we don't know? Because we're not testing that part of the hypothesis. Because the hypothesis on purpose stayed very wide because they wanted to have control of the culture about depression, which they manage. So it doesn't matter how precise they were in their testing. The hypothesis was bullshit because far too wide. Your hypothesis has to be precise for science to happen. You cannot just have precise testing. It's not enough. So that's the problem we're facing. So that's why the performance box, that's why the S pyramid, that's why the M pyramid, that's why all that stuff is I am trying to create a more precise hypothesis because this is the only way that you can make progress.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, I know the only way you can provide a wide offer to your clients, right?
Yes,
to make sure that
so
your
that
clients make
we see what works for you, because again, like this shit is going to take months, not weeks, months, sometimes years, in order to make progress. In order to understand how to get out of those traps, right? We need more precise hypothesis. Yeah. That's what those pyramids and boxes are, is trying to give you the correct idea about the context being talked about. That's the point of all this. So, anyway. That's for this podcast, and I shall see you guys next week.
Thank you guys for listening and for commenting. We really appreciate it.
Yes, we do.
Interact.
Yes, we do.
It's really, really helpful for us as well.
Yes, it does. Bye, everybody.
Bye.